3. Kahahai. To follow. Several years after those priests arrived, I had another experience that is still as real to me as life on Molokai. It was much like any other day in Honolulu. The trade winds were gentle, the air was filled with the sweet scent of our flowering trees, and the mountains were rich with color. By this time I was 13 years old. I spent my days in school and endured all that the teachers asked of me. I composed a poem about Hawaii and memorized the names of 12 European countries. I added and subtracted numbers and practiced reading and penmanship. But my heart was with Kameka. I knew he was leading some tourists on an expedition. He would be done by the time I was finished with lessons. After class I dashed outside, climbed onto Maui, and rode to Kameka's house. I found him napping on a mat outside his door. When my shadow crossed his face he jumped to his feet. "Okay," he said. "I thought you would never come." He picked up the bundle beside him and tied it onto his horse. Then he climbed onto Pele and prodded her into a run. Maui and I followed. We were off on a mountain adventure. We had planned it for days. My mother would not worry about me, after all, I was safe with Kameka. We rode Mauka toward the mountain past the patches where kalo grew and up into the forest. I could almost feel the arithmetic and geography sliding off my back. I pulled off my shirt and stuffed it into one of my saddlebags. I threw my shoulders back and enjoyed the feel of the wind in my ears. The forest was shadowy and cool. Tree ferns brushed our arms and yellow hibiscus blossoms hung down into our path. At first, sunlight made bright designs on the trail. But soon the trees were so crowded that no light came through at all. We crossed a stream and then rode alongside it. The path grew steeper, and after a while we let our horses drink at a deep pool. I slid to the ground and put my face into the water, too. I loved the smell of moss and leaves and forest streams. I should have known better than to put my face into the water before Kameka put his face in. Suddenly I felt his foot on my backside. And the next thing I felt was cold on my head and then my shoulders. I tumbled into the deep pool of water. I held my breath and let myself go. When I came to the surface, I shook the water out of my eyes and looked around. I didn't see Kameka anywhere. But I heard him laughing. And then I heard a tree limb shake overhead in a loud "okay," and felt a huge splash right beside me. I waited until I saw Kameka's curly black hair coming through the surface. He was smiling even before he came out of the water. Before he could take a good gulp of air I grabbed his head and pushed him down. Of course he pulled me with him. We battled each other until I begged him to leave me alone. That's how our games always went. Kameka was so fast and strong that he never got tired before I did. We climbed back onto our horses and rode higher into the hills. Soon we were too high up for many trees or shrubs to grow. Ahead of us were gray lava peaks. I was glad Maui was sure-footed and unafraid because the trail took us right to the edge of the mountain. I felt weak when I looked down. Sometimes I wanted to turn around, but Kameka and Pele went first, and I knew that if they could do it, Maui and I could too. Ahead of us I saw more peaks. Many streams dropped from their sides into the depths. For nearly every waterfall there was a rainbow. The setting sun threw an orange glow onto the mountains, and in spite of my fear I wanted to stay in this place with Kameka forever. Finally we stopped. Kameka climbed down and removed his large bundle from behind his saddle. He unrolled the leaf mats that covered it. Inside was fruit, a coconut, shrimps wrapped in a banana leaf, and a calabash of poi. And blankets. We were very hungry by now, so we sat on one of the mats and put the calabash between us. I dipped my fingers into the thick, purplish paste and then into my mouth. This poi, Hawaii's favorite food, was as familiar to me as Kameka himself. Together we had grown the kalo plants in a watery patch. And together we had harvested their fleshy corms. Kameka had baked the tubers and I had helped him pound them, adding just the right amount of water. After we ate, we opened the coconut and shared its milk. Then we cut the crisp white flesh into little pieces. We lay back on our mats and munched while Kameka talked about the sightseers he'd led into the mountains that day. The woman was very brave, he said, but her husband was like a child. I showed him 4 times how to make the horse jump across the gulch, but he would not do it. His wife did it without fear. And then she had to do it again because the man paid me extra to turn around. So I took them by the easy trail, and while we rode I told him about the marchers of the night. I shivered and reached for one of the blankets Kameka had brought. "Did you scare him?" I asked. "What about the woman?" "The woman thinks Hawaii's spirits are silly. But still she's very curious about our legends. So I told her the night marchers are giants of men. I showed her how they chant and carry torches as they march to the sea. Did you tell her that your tutu herself has seen them? Of course, said Kameka. I told her they appear out of nowhere and every Hawaiian fears the thought of meeting them. I said that if a house is in their path they will march right through it. When I said that, the man begged me to stop. But his wife patted his hand and said, "Now, dear, there is no truth in Hawaii's legends." Kameka does not like it when foreigners deny our spirits. Mostly we have rejected them ourselves. But the night marchers, well, every Hawaiian knows someone who claims to have seen them. And lying out there in the forest that night I had to look around to convince myself they weren't nearby. I pulled the blanket more tightly around me. What would you do? I asked Kameka. If the night marchers appeared to you. Of course fearless Kameka did not hide beneath a blanket. He did not tremble or talk of running. He laughed and said boldly, I would join them in their march. He slapped me on the shoulder. You would join them too, Pia. You are braver than any foreigner. But I didn't feel so brave right then. I was afraid I would dream of the night marchers. Was I safe there at the top of the mountain? I stayed awake a long time after Kameka's breathing told me he was asleep. Pele and Maui were sleeping too. I pulled my blanket around my shoulders, and it made me feel safer. And besides, Kameka was close by. There was nothing to be afraid of. Before long the marchers of the night seemed far away and not so real. I rolled onto my tummy and was nearly asleep when I heard Kameka talking. Go away. What? Go away. I can't look at you. I sat up. Had the night marchers come? I looked around, afraid that I would see torches coming over the precipice. But it was dark. And the only thing I heard was the sound of the wind. Then Kameka called out again. Louder this time. No. I don't want to see you. Leave me alone. He squirmed wildly on his mat like a shrimp washed onto shore. And he sounded frightened. Go away. Go away. I shook him then. Kameka. Wake up. They are not here. The night marchers are not here. Kameka shook himself as if he wanted to come awake. What? He asked. And then he realized I was there. He realized where he was. You were dreaming about the marchers of the night, I said. You didn't want to look at them. But you're awake now and they're not here. It felt strange for me to say those things to him, as if Kameka was a frightened child and I was the grown-up. Kameka got up and went to his saddlebag. He came back with 2 bananas and handed one to me. We were back to our old way now, with him taking care of me. He began to eat and I started asking questions. How did they look? I asked. Were they really big? Who? The night marchers. You were dreaming. Kameka laughed then and shook his head. No, he said. I did not dream about the night marchers. So I asked him what he was dreaming about. Let's sleep, he said. He lay back on his mat and began to sing a sailor song he'd learned from Baldrike. And the next thing I knew, the sun was peeking over the mountain range ahead of us. Even with my eyes shut I knew that Kameka was climbing out of his blankets, stretching his arms and legs, eager for a day of play. The morning was cool here on the mountain, so I snuggled into my mat and pulled the blanket over my head. I wasn't ready to greet the day. But I couldn't lie there for long. Kameka was ready for adventure. He pulled the blanket away from me and put his big toes nearly into my face. Up with you, lazy one, he said. I wanted to push his foot away and turn over. But I sat up instead. Kameka handed me a mango fruit. Its cool, yellow sweetness brought me awake. The juice of it dripped down my chin and onto my chest. I shivered. He threw my shirt at me and I pulled it over my head. Pele and Maui stamped impatiently. They were tired of standing at the top of this mountain. While we rode, I kept my eye on Pele and Kameka to see what was ahead. We traveled down and down, slipping at times, when loose rocks went tumbling into the depths. I didn't like danger, but I would do anything Kameka asked of me. Even when I was terrified I knew I could do it if he went first. After a while Kameka called back, water hole ahead. I was glad of that. My muscles ached from hanging onto my horse during the steepest parts of the ride. I was thirsty and knew that our horses would be too. But I found out that Maui and Pele would have to wait. When Kameka stopped his horse and hopped off, There was no water hole in sight. He stripped off his straw hat, his white shirt and blue trousers. I could see he had a swimming spot hidden away somewhere. I followed him to a rock overhang and looked out over the edge. I saw a large pool of water below. It was farther than I had ever dived before. How did you find this place? I asked. I discovered it when I was leading some Americans on an expedition. Kameka poised himself at the edge of the rock. I looked again to the water far below. Did you dive here before? Of course. Kameka leaned forward. Did they dive too? He stopped. What? The Americans. Did they dive here? Oh, no. They were afraid. Kameka took a deep breath and put his hands out wide. He started to lean forward again. How deep is the water down there? Kameka stepped back and looked at me. It's plenty deep. And wide enough, too. Are you scared? Oh, no, I said. If you can do it, I can do it. Of course, said Kameka. Now watch how I do it. He leaned forward, spread his arms, and dived straight and clean into the water below. Just watching him made me feel like I was falling, too. I grabbed for a small tree beside the rock I was standing on. I waited for Kameka to come up out of the water. It took a long time. But finally he came up. Okay. I heard him call. Come on, Pia. He swam to the edge of the pool and waited. I knew I had to go. But I had lied to Kameka. I wanted to be as strong and fast and daring as he was. I wanted to do everything he could do, but I could not. I was afraid. I heard him down there calling my name. I had to dive. I stood at the edge of the rock, in the same spot where Kameka had stood. I breathed deeply. I leaned forward and felt the earth shake. But I spread my arms and dived. Okay. The earth shook again, harder this time. All the way down I felt it shaking. I saw rocks and trees going up past me and the water coming at me. I moved my hands out ahead of me to break through the water. I felt the cold and knew that I had not broken my head open on a rock. I was going down into the depths. I held my breath and let the good feeling bring me up. And when I came to the top, Kameka was there. He grabbed me and shouted, "Bully for you, Pia. You were not afraid." He was so proud and I felt so pleased with myself that I did not tell him the truth. I let him think I was as brave as he was. We swam then and looked up at the rock overhang and congratulated ourselves for being so daring. We did not play games or push each other into the water as we had the day before. But then I decided to trick Kameka. It would be my revenge on him for shoving me into the water when I was getting a drink. I swam to the other side of the water hole and began to yell. Help me, Kameka. My leg, it hurts. I cannot move it. Help. I'm drowning. With my mouth open, still calling for help, I slid slowly beneath the water. I went down and then when I thought Kameka would be worrying, I kicked my legs and pushed myself back up. When I came close to the top, I saw a face above the water. And a hand reaching out to me. I reached for the hand. I would let Kameka pull me onto the rocks and then I would jump up and laugh at the frightened look on his face. I would show him I was not hurt. It would be a good prank. But before I could take the hand, I heard Kameka's voice. Don't touch him, he said fiercely. I felt Kameka grab me from behind. I heard his soft grunts as he swam with me under his arm. I was confused. Someone else must have reached out to me. But who? I looked back to see. A man kneeling at the water's edge stared after us. Right away I could see the leprosy tumors that covered his face. That's why Kameka was dragging me away. The disease of leprosy was spreading across Hawaii's islands. My mother's sister had it. And now, seeing that man's face, I remembered my aunt's death. Kameka urged me to the other side of the water and we crawled onto a rock. I looked back for the man with leprosy, but he had disappeared into the forest. Don't stare, said Kameka as if he thought I would catch the disease by just looking at it. That man, I panted. He had leprosy. Suddenly Kameka was as serious as a missionary. His dark eyes blazed and he gripped my arm. He narrowed his eyes into little slits and set his brown jaw in a hard line. That man must be hiding in the mountains so the authorities won't ship him to Molokai. Molokai. I've heard that if you go to Molokai you can't come back again. That man should die at home with his family. Kameka, we should help him. No. Kameka nearly shouted when he said it, and his voice sounded the way it had during the night when he was dreaming. Almost like he was frightened. I knew that the foreigners were afraid of leprosy. But most of our people were not. Our king has to protect the rest of us, said Kameka. If they don't go away, their disease will kill us all. Leprosy is contagious. You don't want to get it, do you? Kameka was right. I did not want to get leprosy. What would happen to me if I did? I shuddered just thinking about being sent away to Molokai. But Kameka steadied me with his strong arm. Don't worry, Pia, he said. I will protect you. Of course it was true. Kameka had always protected me. Still, in spite of his promise, I felt for a moment like the earth was shaking.